I think it's very important that tradition stays, and tradition has a huge part of all this. But there's also points where you look at tradition and go, is that still fit for purpose today? Is that still the right thing to do?
Something shifted inside Windsor, and this time, it did not come with an announcement. A quiet decision, a closed door, and one name suddenly absent from the inner circle. And as the silence settled, Princess Anne's reaction said more than any statement ever could. The morning Windsor changed forever. There are mornings that pass unnoticed, blending quietly into the rhythm of routine. And then there are mornings that carry a shift so subtle, so controlled, that only those closest to the center can feel it. Windsor has witnessed centuries of such moments, decisions made behind closed doors that later reshape the course of the monarchy. But on one particular morning, in early 2026, something changed in a way few could have predicted, and even fewer were prepared to confront. The grounds of Windsor Castle were as composed as ever. Staff moved with practiced precision, guards maintained their posts with unwavering discipline, and the carefully maintained illusion of continuity remained intact. To an outsider, nothing seemed different. The same routines, the same silence, the same sense of permanence. But inside one private office, the tone was entirely different. Prince William had arrived earlier than expected. Those who noticed did not question it, but they remembered it. There was a sense of purpose in his movements, a clarity that suggested this was not an ordinary day of meetings and ceremonial obligations. This was something else entirely. For months there had been quiet observations, not discussions, not confrontations, but a careful accumulation of details that, when viewed individually, might have seemed insignificant. A comment overheard in the wrong setting, a presence that extended a little too far beyond its expected boundary, a growing discomfort among those tasked with maintaining the delicate structure of royal life. At the center of those observations was a figure who, until recently, had moved comfortably within certain royal spaces. Camilla's grandson had never been formally positioned within the hierarchy of duty, yet his proximity to the inner circle had given him a level of access that many outside the family could only imagine. It was a position built on trust, familiarity, and the quiet assumption that boundaries would be understood without needing to be enforced. But something had changed. Those closest to the situation would later suggest that the shift did not come from a single incident. There was no dramatic turning point, no moment that could be pointed to as the beginning of the end. Instead, it was a gradual realization, a pattern forming over time, becoming impossible to ignore. William had been watching, not reacting, not intervening, but observing with a level of focus that reflected the weight of his current role. As the future king, he no longer had the luxury of treating such matters as personal inconveniences. Every decision, every tolerance, every exception carried consequences far beyond the immediate moment. And on that morning, the observation became action. The meeting itself was brief. There were no raised voices, no visible tension spilling into the corridors. That is not how such decisions are made within the royal household. Instead, there was a calm firmness, a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. Access would be withdrawn. It was not framed as punishment. It was not presented as a negotiation. It was a decision, fully formed and already in motion. The kind of decision that does not require explanation because its authority is understood. For those who became aware of it in the hours that followed, the reaction was immediate but contained. Conversations lowered in volume. Movements became more measured. The unspoken understanding spread quickly through the inner circle. Something significant had happened, and it would not be undone. Camilla's grandson, once a quiet presence within certain spaces of Windsor, was no longer part of that environment. Not through announcement, not through spectacle, but through absence. The most powerful signal the monarchy has always known. What made this moment different was not just the decision itself, but what it represented. This was not a reaction to public pressure. There had been no headlines forcing the issue, no external crisis demanding a response. This came from within. From a determination to define the boundaries of the monarchy's future with precision and without hesitation. For William, the line between family and institution had become clearer than ever before, and once that line was crossed, there was only one way to respond. By the time the morning had passed and the routines of Windsor continued as if nothing had changed, everything had already changed. Because in a place where silence is often more powerful than words, the absence of one individual spoke louder than any announcement ever could. the quiet exit no one expected. At first, it did not look like an exit at all. There were no suitcases carried through the grand entrances of Windsor, no tense farewells witnessed by staff, no official acknowledgement that anything had changed. On the surface, everything appeared as it always had. But within the carefully controlled environment of royal life, absence has a way of revealing itself slowly, almost methodically, until it can no longer be ignored. The first signs were subtle. A name that had once appeared effortlessly on internal lists was no longer included. Access permissions that had long been taken for granted quietly disappeared without explanation. Invitations that had once arrived with quiet consistency simply stopped. There was no single moment that marked the departure. Instead, it unfolded in stages, each one reinforcing the same message. This was not temporary. For those within the inner workings of Windsor, the change was unmistakable. Royal households operate on precision, and even the smallest adjustment is noticed by those trained to observe without reacting. The absence of Camilla's grandson did not create chaos. It created something far more telling, a controlled silence that signaled a deliberate shift in position. What made the situation particularly striking was how unexpected it was. There had been no visible tension in public, no dramatic incident that might have prepared observers for such a decisive outcome. To the outside world, the connection between Camilla and her grandson remained a private family matter, separate from the formal structure of the monarchy. But inside Windsor, the distinction between private and institutional is never as clear as it seems. Those familiar with the internal dynamics began to piece together what had been happening behind the scenes. It was not about one mistake or one moment of misjudgment. It was about a pattern that had slowly drawn attention. A growing sense that the balance between proximity and discretion was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. There were whispers of conversations that extended beyond their intended audience. Small details that found their way into places they should never have reached. Moments that, taken individually, might have been dismissed, but collectively suggested something more concerning. In a different context, such issues might have been managed quietly, corrected without consequence. But Windsor does not operate on the assumption of second chances when the stakes are this high. The institution has learned, often through difficult experience, that small breaches can lead to much larger problems if left unaddressed. And so, the decision once made was executed with precision. No announcement was issued because none was necessary. Within the royal household, communication does not always rely on words. It relies on structure, on access, on presence, or, in this case, the removal of it. Doors that once opened without question remained closed. Spaces that had once felt familiar became inaccessible. The transition was seamless in its execution, leaving no room for confusion about what had changed. For Camilla's grandson, the realization would not have come all at once. It would have arrived in fragments. A canceled arrangement here, a missed invitation there, a gradual awareness that something fundamental had shifted. By the time the full picture became clear, the decision had already taken hold. What made this exit particularly significant was not just the removal itself, but the message it carried. This was not about exclusion for the sake of discipline. It was about defining limits, about reinforcing the idea that proximity to the monarchy does not guarantee permanence within it. For years, the boundaries surrounding extended family connections had remained flexible, shaped by personal relationships and informal understandings. But this moment signaled a departure from that approach, a move towards something more structured, more controlled, and far less forgiving. Within Windsor, the reaction remained measured. There were no open discussions, no visible divisions. But beneath the surface, the implications were being carefully considered. If such a decision could be made so quietly, so decisively, what did it mean for others who existed within similar spaces? The atmosphere shifted, not dramatically, but enough to be felt by those attuned to it. Conversations became more cautious, movements more deliberate. The invisible lines that define royal life became sharper, more clearly drawn. And yet, beyond the walls of Windsor, the world remained largely unaware. There were no headlines capturing the moment, no public acknowledgement of what had taken place. The quiet nature of the exit ensured that it remained contained, understood only by those within the immediate sphere of influence. But within that sphere, the impact was undeniable. Because in a system built on tradition and continuity, even the smallest shift can carry lasting consequences. And this was not a small shift. It was a deliberate recalibration of boundaries, executed without hesitation and without reversal. The exit may have been quiet, but its meaning echoed far beyond the moment itself. William's breaking point behind palace doors. To understand why this moment unfolded with such quiet finality, it is necessary to look beyond the immediate situation and into the pressures shaping Prince William's position. Because what appeared on the surface as a controlled decision was, in reality, the result of something far deeper, a shift that had been building over time, shaped by experience, responsibility, and an increasingly clear vision of what the monarchy must become. For much of his life, William has existed between two worlds, one defined by family, emotion, and personal loyalty, the other governed by duty, expectation, and the weight of an institution that does not bend easily to individual preference. In earlier years, there was room to navigate between those worlds, to allow personal relationships a degree of flexibility. But that space has been narrowing, and now it has almost disappeared entirely. Those close to him have observed a change. Not sudden, not dramatic, but unmistakable. A growing firmness in his decisions, a reduced tolerance for ambiguity, and above all, a heightened awareness of how even the smallest internal issue can ripple outward into something far more damaging. This did not happen in isolation. It was shaped by years of watching how the monarchy responds under pressure, how private matters become public crises, how hesitation, even when well-intentioned, can create vulnerabilities that are difficult to contain. William has seen what happens when lines are not drawn early enough. He has seen how personal dynamics, left unchecked, can evolve into situations that threaten the stability of the entire institution. And with that understanding has come a determination to act differently. The situation involving Camilla's grandson appears to have reached a point where that determination could no longer remain theoretical. It became practical, immediate, unavoidable. It was not about a single incident that demanded action. It was about a pattern that, in William's view, carried the potential for future risk. And in his current position, risk is not something to be managed passively. It is something to be eliminated before it has the chance to grow. Inside palace doors, discussions around such matters are rarely emotional in the way people might imagine. There are no dramatic confrontations, no impulsive decisions driven by frustration. Instead, there is analysis, observation, and when necessary, decisive action. William's breaking point was not an explosion, it was a conclusion, a moment when the accumulation of concerns reached a threshold that could no longer be ignored, a realization that maintaining the current situation would require a level of compromise that he was no longer willing to accept, because at the center of his thinking is a single principle: the monarchy must be protected, not just in the present, but for the future he is preparing to inherit. That principle changes everything. It transforms personal relationships into considerations of institutional impact. It reframes decisions that might otherwise be handled privately into actions that carry broader significance. And it removes the option of inaction, even when action may create discomfort within the family. Those familiar with William's approach describe it as it was about defining the terms under which the monarchy will operate moving forward. And those terms are becoming increasingly clear. Proximity is not entitlement. Access is not permanent, and any presence within the royal sphere must align fully with the expectations that come with it. What makes this moment particularly significant is not just the decision itself, but what it reveals about William's leadership. He is no longer navigating the monarchy as a future responsibility. He is shaping it in real time, setting precedents that will influence how similar situations are handled in the years to come. The breaking point then was not a moment of loss of control. It was the opposite. It was a moment of control being fully asserted, a decision made not in reaction to pressure, but in anticipation of it. And in doing so, William has signaled something that those within the royal household understand immediately, even if the outside world does not. The era of quiet tolerance is ending, and in its place, a new standard is taking hold: Camilla's private fury and family fallout. If the decision at Windsor was executed in silence, the reaction it triggered within the family carried a very different energy. not loud, not publicly visible, but deeply felt in the private spaces where royal dynamics are most raw and unfiltered. For Queen Camilla, the situation was more than an institutional adjustment. It was personal. Her journey into the heart of the monarchy has never been simple. For years, she navigated public skepticism, private scrutiny, and the complex process of earning acceptance within a structure that does not easily accommodate change. Every step she took required balance between loyalty and restraint, between family and duty, between who she was before and who she had to become. And now that balance had been disrupted. The removal of her grandson from Windsor was not just a decision made by the future king. It was a boundary drawn that directly intersected with her own sense of family, a line that, from her perspective, may have felt sharper than necessary and far more final than expected. Those familiar with the internal atmosphere suggest that her reaction was not immediate outrage, but something more controlled, a quiet, contained frustration that unfolded behind closed doors. The kind of reaction shaped by years of experience, where emotions are managed carefully, even when they run deep. There were conversations, not explosive confrontations, but firm exchanges that carried an unmistakable tension beneath their calm surface. Camilla, known for her ability to navigate difficult situations with composure, reportedly sought clarity, not just about the decision itself, but about what it represented. Because the implications extended beyond one individual. If William was willing to act so decisively in this situation, it raised a broader question about where influence truly begins and ends within the royal family. Camilla has long operated within a space that blends personal connection with the institutional role, but this moment suggested that the boundaries of that space were shifting, and not in her favor. For King Charles, the position was equally complex. As both monarch and husband, he stood at the intersection of two competing priorities: the stability of the institution and the cohesion of the family. Balancing those forces has never been easy, and in this case, the tension between them became increasingly difficult to ignore. Sources suggest that Charles approached the situation with caution, aware that any visible alignment could be interpreted as taking sides. His role required him to maintain equilibrium, even when the balance itself was under strain. But within the wider family, the ripple effects were already taking hold. Other members began to observe more closely, not necessarily reacting, but recalibrating their understanding of how far the new boundaries might extend. The atmosphere shifted in subtle ways. Conversations became more measured, interactions more deliberate, because what had once been assumed as informal flexibility now appeared subject to a more rigid framework. For Camilla, the challenge was not simply about processing the decision. It was about adapting to what it signaled for the future, a future in which personal connections may no longer carry the same weight they once did. The emotional impact of that realization cannot be understated. Family, in its most basic form, is built on loyalty and protection. But within the royal structure, those instincts are often tested by the demands of something much larger. An institution that prioritizes continuity over comfort and stability over sentiment. Camilla has spent years learning how to navigate that reality, but this moment presented a new level of complexity, one that forced a reconsideration of where her role truly sits within the evolving structure of the monarchy. The fallout then was not explosive. It was controlled, contained, and deeply internal, but in many ways that made it far more significant. Because within the quiet corridors of royal life, it is not the loud reactions that shape the future. It is the silent adjustments that follow. Anne's silence that spoke volumes. In a family often defined by its ability to command attention without speaking, few understand the power of silence better than Princess Anne. For decades, she has built a reputation not through spectacle or emotional display, but through consistency, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to duty. While others have found themselves pulled into the currents of public opinion and private conflict, Anne has remained something else entirely: steady, focused, unmoved by the noise surrounding her. So, when the situation at Windsor unfolded, it was not her words that drew attention. It was the absence of them. In the days following the quiet removal of Camilla's grandson, there were no visible signs of intervention from Anne, no discreet meetings that suggested mediation, no subtle gestures indicating alignment with either side. Instead, she continued exactly as she always had, carrying out her engagements, maintaining her schedule, and presenting the same composed presence that has defined her role for years. To an outsider, this might appear unremarkable, but within the royal family, such consistency in the face of tension is never accidental. It is deliberate, and often it is deeply revealing. Because Anne does not ignore situations, she assesses them. Those who understand her approach suggest that she views every development through a lens shaped by decades of experience. She has witnessed the consequences of indecision. She has seen how hesitation can allow small issues to grow into significant challenges. And she has learned that the monarchy does not survive through emotional reaction, but through measured control. In that context, her silence begins to take on a different meaning. It was not disengagement, it was acknowledgement, a quiet recognition that what had happened at Windsor was not impulsive, not unnecessary, and not something that required correction. If anything, her lack of response suggested that she saw the decision as aligned with the principles she herself has followed throughout her life. Duty above all else. For Anne, the monarchy has never been about personal comfort. It has never been about accommodating individual relationships at the expense of institutional strength. Her entire public life reflects a belief that the role of a royal is to serve, to endure, and to uphold the structure that has been passed down through generations. From that perspective, William's actions may not have appeared harsh, they may have appeared inevitable. And that is where her silence becomes most significant. Because in a family where even the smallest gesture can carry meaning, the absence of resistance is often interpreted as quiet support. Not vocal endorsement, not public approval, but something more subtle, a confirmation that the direction being taken does not conflict with the core values of the institution. Observers who have followed Anne's role within the royal family note that she rarely involves herself in disputes unless absolutely necessary. Her influence does not come from intervention, but from example. By continuing her duties without disruption, she reinforces a message that transcends the immediate situation. The monarchy moves forward. Regardless of personal tension, regardless of internal shifts, the work continues. That message, though unspoken, carries weight. It signals to others within the family that the situation does not warrant escalation, that it does not require negotiation or reconsideration, and perhaps most importantly, that the decision itself does not threaten the stability of the institution. For those who might have expected Anne to act as a mediator, her silence would have been particularly striking. She has the experience, the authority, and the respect to step into such a role if she chose to. But in this case, she did not. And that choice speaks volumes. It suggests that she did not see a conflict that needed resolving. She saw a boundary being enforced, a structure being protected, and a future being shaped with clarity. Within the wider context of the royal family, Anne's position has always been unique. She operates without the need for approval, without the desire for attention, and without the inclination to soften difficult realities. That independence allows her to respond to situations in a way that is often more revealing than any statement could be. In this moment, her response was not to speak. It was to remain exactly where she has always been, steady, focused, and aligned with the principle that has guided her entire life. The monarchy endures not through comfort, but through discipline. And in her silence, Anne made it clear that she understood exactly what was at stake. A royal line, drawn in the sand. There are moments in royal history when a decision does more than resolve a situation. It redefines the structure itself. What happened at Windsor was not simply about one individual being removed from a space they once occupied. It was about something far more consequential, a boundary being made visible, a line, long understood but rarely enforced so clearly, finally drawn in the sand. For years, the monarchy has existed within a delicate balance between tradition and adaptation. It has evolved when necessary, adjusted to public expectation, and navigated internal challenges with a careful blend of discretion and restraint. But that balance has often come at a cost. Flexibility, while useful, can sometimes blur the lines that hold an institution together. What Prince William's decision represents is a departure from that ambiguity. It signals a shift towards something more defined, more structured, and far less willing to accommodate uncertainty within its inner circle. At the heart of this moment is a question that has followed the royal family for generations. Who belongs within the operational core of the monarchy, and under what conditions? In the past, that question has not always been answered directly. Family connections, personal relationships, and historical precedent have often shaped the answer in ways that leave room for interpretation. But interpretation, as recent years have shown, can create vulnerability. William appears determined to remove that vulnerability. By acting decisively in a situation that could easily have been managed quietly over time, he has established a precedent. One that suggests access to the monarchy's inner sphere is no longer something that can exist in a gray area. It must be clearly justified, clearly defined, and fully aligned with the expectations that come with it. This is not simply about control, it is about clarity. Clarity in who represents the institution. Clarity in how boundaries are maintained. And clarity in the understanding that proximity to power does not equate to participation in it. For the royal household, this kind of clarity changes the internal dynamic in subtle but significant ways. It removes assumptions. It replaces informal understanding with formal expectation. And it creates an environment where every presence within the system must be accounted for, not just tolerated. Those observing the shift from within are likely to recognize its broader implications. If one boundary can be enforced with such finality, others can follow. The flexibility that once allowed extended connections to exist within the royal sphere may now be replaced by a more disciplined approach. For Queen Camilla, the moment represents a recalibration, not only of her personal position within the family, but of the influence that comes with it. The understanding that personal ties, no matter how meaningful, may not carry the same weight when measured against the priorities of the future monarchy. For King Charles, it reflects the ongoing transition of authority, a gradual but unmistakable movement of decision-making toward the next generation, one that does not require formal transfer of power to be felt in practice. And for Prince William himself, it marks a defining step in his evolution as a leader within the monarchy. He is no longer operating as a figure preparing for responsibility. He is exercising it, shaping the institution in real time, making decisions that carry long-term consequences, and establishing the standards by which future situations will be judged. What makes this moment particularly significant is not the visibility of the action, but its permanence. There was no announcement because none was needed. The impact was understood by those within the system, and that is where it matters most. Royal history is not only written in public events, it is shaped in private decisions that alter the course of how the institution functions. This was one of those decisions, a quiet removal that carried a powerful message. The monarchy is entering a phase where sentiment is no longer enough to secure a place within its structure, where loyalty must be matched by discipline, and where presence must be justified by purpose. The line has been drawn, not loudly, not publicly, but with a clarity that leaves no room for misunderstanding. And once a line like that is established within the royal family, it does not easily disappear.